Everybody, we are back. There we are. Welcome in to the first Dream Stream of the 2021-2022 season. My name's Zac Graham of the FTN Network, aka Kawhisenberg DFS, and I'll be your host today on the Dream Stream and joined by two of my good friends, two of the sharpest minds in the industry, certainly here at FTN Daily, Kyle Murray and Joe Metz. And while everybody's kind of filing in here, I'll start with you first, Joe, because the banner's hung, it's covered up, the rings have been fitted. How are you feeling about your Bucks ring ceremony? I think kicking off here in about 30 minutes.
Yeah, I'm excited. Have it recording. Dream Stream takes priority. As crazy as it sounds, it does. I can't let the people down, but yeah, I'm excited. I feel good about a potential repeat with the Kyrie debacle and Ben Simmons and everything. So feeling good. It's fun that the Bucks and the Nets are the first game of the season. I think that's the best way to kick it off.
Yeah, I do not disagree with you, and I don't think any of the other NBA fans do either. And on the other side of me, Kyle Murray, the optimizer extraordinaire. I don't know if anybody tuned in or how many of you tuned in to the Opto today. I had it running while I was dealing with some other work stuff, and Kyle crushing it every afternoon. So make sure you tune into that throughout the rest of the week as we fire up the NBA season. And Kyle, welcome back to the NBA streets. How you doing, man?
I'm doing good. I'm thrilled to be back on the NBA streets. You know, Joe, I'm going to say, how are the favorites? I think the Pistons have a good chance in there, man. I don't know, man. Might be the Pistons season.
Hey,
you never know.
Kate Cunningham's out tomorrow, so the best they can do is 81-1. But let's pump the brakes a little bit.
We're shooting for the stars, man. All jokes aside, I'm pumped for NBA season. It's one of my favorite seasons to grind out. I think the daily routine of it is awesome, and I've been talking about that on the show that I've been doing the Optimal every Monday through Friday. So yeah, it's been fun, and I'm pumped to do the NBA show with you guys.
Awesome. Well, before we get started, I will say we are presented by Superdraft Daily Fantasy. We'll be the presenting sponsor of all the FTN NBA streams this season. And if you haven't played on Superdraft before, you can head to superdraft.io. And when you get registered and sign up, if you deposit using the promo code FTN, any deposit of $100 or more, Superdraft's going to give you $100 in bonus funds. And fellas, that's only a 1x playthrough on those bonus funds. So there's no slow drip, and you can turn those bonus funds into cash fast. So I know as daily fantasy players ourselves, or a retired one recently, myself, we love that 1x playthrough. So good deals on Superdraft. I know that I think T Panthers in the Discord channel was pointing out some potential overlay spots over there in the Superdraft lobby. And then, we won't leave out some of those other sites, DraftKings, FanDuel. I know Herm was in the chat talking about some overlay brewing in those lobbies as well. So good spots to attack across the industry in DFS today on this 2-game slate. And we'll be here for an hour, so plenty of time, but we'll go ahead and get into it. And we can start with this first game, the ring ceremony game, the rematch of the 7-game semifinal series in the East last year. Brooklyn visiting Milwaukee. And Joe, since you're the home team, we'll start with you. Ton of studs on today's slate, right? The typical opening night slate for NBA. And in my opinion, NBA DFS really starts on the second day when we always have a massive slate. But plenty of great players to slide into our lineups tonight. So talk to me. DraftKings, FanDuel, Superdraft. What are you looking at up top here in this first game?
So I'll start with DraftKings. Season after season pricing is soft on the opening slate, but I think 10K for Giannis is just downright egregious. I don't think anyone's going to disagree with that. Like, he's an 11K plus player, especially in a game which the total has steamed down. I got it at under 239.5 last week. I think last I saw this afternoon with Meany, it was 233.5. So it's like sailing down. But it's still going to be the highest projected game by a pretty wide margin between the two games. Giannis is my starting point. Shocker to anyone. But I think that'll be everyone's starting point on this slate. But in studs in general in this game, if you're looking at just Harden, Giannis, and Durant, I much prefer those three to the 3 Lakers studs and Steph Curry on this slate.
Sure. I don't think I differ too much from you, but Kyle, what are you thinking in regards to kind of the top of this first game?
Yeah, Giannis is going to be a priority for me as well. I'm right there with Joe on that kind of line of thinking. I will say today is a day where for someone like myself who likes to work on a lot of data points. We don't really have any, obviously, with it being the first night of NBA. So I think this is a great night to maybe second guess the public. We're all working with the same kind of information, and that is either last year, which could be very faulty, or none, right? For some players, rookies, certain rotations, certain teams have been completely changed. So I will say playing the ownership game, I think, is extremely important tonight on a 2-game slate. It's always important on a 2-game slate. It's always important any slate, but even more so on a 2-game slate, and even more so early in the season where the public is kind of falling victim to groupthink and they find themselves flocking to certain plays, whether that be right or wrong. Just the opportunity to take advantage of maybe some overconfidence in certain plays is kind of what I'm trying to do tonight. Giannis is kind of the guy, in my opinion, where you kind of have a good idea of what you're going to get from Giannis, and this might be one of the better spots for him in terms of the big problem with Giannis over the past couple of years has been the minutes and blowouts. This game was a push for the first week or so while the line was up, and I believe at one point it fell to -1. So nobody in their right mind is expecting a blowout here. So we should be able to see full blown Giannis. So Giannis is the top end stud for me tonight. But after that, I don't mind getting different and taking some shots on stars and scrubs build. So it'll be fun to talk about that as we go on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think some of the ownership projections that you're rolling out in the Opto are going to be our best friend in tournaments tonight, especially up top with these studs and some of these studs on new teams. Obviously, we'll get to Russell Westbrook and the obvious other two stars on that Lakers team. I do kind of want to point everybody towards Fast Eddie Fear's rankings. Obviously, Fast Eddie Fear not with us today. But I am lucky enough to be able to be working with Eddie doing kind of composite rankings this season. So any night that he's not here on stream, all you guys, all the subscribers just know that he and I are in communication every single day. So even when he's not on stream, he has a big say in these rankings going up on the site. And those are pinned for all FTN Daily NBA subscribers in the Discord. And obviously you can find that at ftndaily.com as well. So, Kyle, one thing I kind of wanted to touch on here is we talked about the ownership for the studs. Looking in this first game right now, I kind of want to touch on all three sites, and we can kind of take our time to break it down site by site. Right now, you've got James Harden barely edging out Jordan Poole as the highest owned player on DraftKings. And then in terms of those studs from the first game, Giannis right behind Harden, 59 for Harden, 53 for Giannis, then 43 for Drew Holiday. So you're not seeing Kevin Durant pop up there. You've got him all the way down at 29. So I'll start with you, Kyle. Do you think that Kevin Durant is where you're going to try to get leverage on the field tonight?
Yeah, he's definitely my favorite contrarian pay up option. I mean, the reason why I think Durant's going to come a little bit lower on this, he's basically the same price as Giannis, where I think Giannis will be the more popular top end stud because you can play him at center. But after that, Durant, where you can play him at small forward or power forward. You have LeBron in that same kind of position there, and then you have Harden on the same team, not the same position, but cheaper as well. So there's cheaper options, and that's kind of why I think you'll have Durant at a lower ownership. And the reason why I like that so much is because on a slate like today, where you can really do weird things with your lineup, because no matter what, it's going to be pretty hard to assume that you're going to have any completely safe spots in your lineup. So don't be afraid to take shots and maybe spend a little bit extra on certain guys. Maybe they don't have the best point per dollar projection, but maybe they have a solid ceiling like we know Kevin Durant has. But even for a value guy, someone like Blake Griffin in this game, for example, he might not be the best point per dollar projected player, but he's so I think he was projected for 4 or 5%. He's at 6% projected ownership right now. So don't be afraid to spend a little bit up for somebody who maybe isn't the best point per dollar value play to maybe get a little bit unique with those builds. So that's kind of my focus tonight. And Durant is that guy for me up at the top, either him or Anthony Davis, who we'll talk about in the second game, but he's also projecting at a fairly low ownership projection right now, about 22%. So in this game, it's Giannis and Durant are my top two priorities. And then we have some potential chalk value plays in this game as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And great advice, especially in these huge tournaments that all the sites are running out for opening night. So, Joe, I want to kind of mix in FanDuel ownership projections here from Kyle, because they're actually very similar with those studs we were talking about. So you're seeing Harden on FanDuel as well, 56% projected ownership, 54 for your guy Giannis, and then Durant all the way down at 31.5. So are you kind of on the same page with Kyle there?
Yeah, I am. I align more with Kyle in terms of DraftKings specifically. The thing is, Durant is cheap enough where you don't really need to sacrifice a Harden or a Giannis if you don't want to and still be okay on this slate. And that's exactly what I plan on doing. On Fanduel, I like Durant quite a bit. I think it's going to be more popular to see lineups choose one of Giannis or Durant, which I think people will default to Giannis. My lean right now on FanDuel specifically is the savings with Anthony Davis, simply because I like his stock upside more on FanDuel than I do DraftKings. But again, there's still so much ambiguity, with that new look offense. You bring in someone that is as ball dominant and demands as many touches as Russell Westbrook does. How is that going to affect this offense? LeBron's been persistent about them running through Anthony Davis. Is Westbrook going to be persistent about it? I don't know. So Durant overall, with factoring in ownership, salary, and just game environment, he is a very close 1B to Giannis, is 1A on the entire slate for me.
Yeah, so it sounds like we're kind of all in lockstep. I don't differ too much from either of you guys on that, but let's, Kyle, you kind of hinted at some of the higher owned value guys in this game. And we can go back to kind of the DK ownership projections you're seeing. I mentioned Drew Holiday, kind of more of a mid-tier guy in terms of price, but then 42% you see Bruce Brown. And on the other side of the ball, you're seeing 36% for Jordan Nwora at min price on DraftKings. And then one of Joe's favorite acquisitions in Bucks history, Grayson Allen, who is the recipient of a new contract extension. So with that, Joe, actually, I'll just bounce it back to you. How are you kind of balancing the value from this first game?
So I think there's ample value in both games. So I'm kind of just opting to find the ones that are less popular. So I understand the appeal of Bruce Brown. I am personally, if I'm running one lineup, will not be playing Bruce Brown simply to just try and leverage the field. Grayson Allen is one of my conviction plays today. He's a popular play. You know how I feel about him, but he's stepping into the role in the starting lineup, replacing Dante, and I guess replacing Pat too from the playoffs. That shooting guard typically plays about 26 to 28 minutes a game, and that was when Dante and Pat were both healthy. So I fully expect the same to happen now with Pat and Grayson Allen. And Grayson Allen's been effective enough for such a low price. He's close to $1,000 less than he was on any slate last year. So if you're putting him into a somewhat similar spot where he's not going to be a high usage guy, but he's in a high total game environment, he's a scrappy player. I don't see any way. He feels like one of the safer floor value plays on this slate. As for Jordan Nwora, it's really hard for me not to play him regardless of the ownership. I'm just kind of a simp for Jordan Nwora as it is. But the thing is, he averages over half a point per minute played, which is ridiculously productive.
Yeah. Real points, real basketball points.
Real basketball points. That is insane. And then, I ran the split today, and it doesn't matter if Giannis and Drew and them are in the lineup or out. He has a 26% usage rate across the board, which shows that, if he's on the court, they're going to get him the ball. He's going to shoot. He does not pass the ball. And he's been very effective, whether it be late season NBA, summer league, preseason, or the Olympics. So we've seen him do well, and it's hard to find downside with a minimum price player that I think, Kyle, you said you have him projected for around 18 minutes. That's more than enough on a slate like this to me.
Yeah, man, I'm right there with you. And I'll say on the FTN NBA podcast last week, we had a pretty extensive Jordan Nwora segment at the end there talking about our love for him. Cause I share that love too, man. You mentioned Olympic basketball, preseason basketball. When Jordan Nwora is on the court, he's putting up massive fantasy numbers in terms of points per minute. And so I'm right there with you. If I was playing my old normal 20 lineups, I would have a ton of Jordan Nwora at min price on DK. So Kyle, in this first game, kind of that low range value there, where are you falling on this?
Yeah, so I think real quick, a standard ownership point that I want to make about today is it's going to be hard to avoid chalk on a 2-game slate. It's essentially impossible. Someone on the show earlier today asked me who are my favorite plays under 10%. There's just not many of them to go off of. So that's one thing is you kind of have to balance, especially if you're doing several lineups. It's important to be able to balance where you're eating chalk, and if you're not eating particular chalk, how you're leveraging that fade, right? So for example, if you're interested in fading somebody in this game, and let's say Jordan Nwora was that guy, you should probably be considering if Nwora were to maybe not see those 17 minutes I am projected for right now, or maybe not see 7-8 shots, who would benefit from that? And obviously, like the top end guys are obviously always going to benefit from the secondary players not taking shots. But specifically, someone like Pat Connaughton, I could see benefiting from Noor just not being involved, or maybe not getting as many minutes as I'm projecting for. I have Connaughton for 23 minutes, and he's not really a guy that I have projecting as a strong value. He's $4,700 on DraftKings, so not overly cheap or anything like that. But 5% projected ownership, we could see him kind of pay off. Obviously not the kind of producer that Noor has been over the course of NBA careers. Noor has been over a fantasy point per minute, while Connaughton's been at about 0.75. But that's just kind of the angle I'm trying to take with certain fades. I'm going to be doing a ton of lineups, so obviously I'm going to have a good amount of Noor and Grayson Allen. But in lineups where I don't have those guys, I want to be thinking about who would benefit if those guys fail. Otherwise, you're kind of just building lineups, hoping that everyone sucks, or hoping that everyone does well, which isn't really going to happen. So you need to have like those particular angles in your head while building lineups. So Grayson Allen, I do like more as an individual play than Bruce Brown, who's in the same game. And one thing that I noticed that was pretty interesting is that Grayson Allen is still popular on FanDuel, but he's not like mega chalk like I thought he would be based on the price. He's $3,800 on FanDuel. Bruce Brown is about $4,900. Bruce Brown's not really getting any ownership over there. So if you wanted to approach that ownership play and just go Bruce Brown over Allen on FanDuel due to the higher price tag and lower ownership, you can do that. But Allen's price being the same on FanDuel as DraftKings, I think that's a pretty interesting play, and the ownership isn't really all that different. And for this year, I'm kind of expecting ownerships to look fairly similar now that we have multi-position eligibility on both sides.
Yeah.
Significant price changes will obviously affect that, but overall it probably won't change too much. So I think Allen not really being overly popular on FanDuel is pretty interesting. So Allen, Noor, I do think are probably two of the better point per dollar plays on the slate. Noor, I think is projecting as the second best point per dollar play for me. So no complaints with it. I just want to make the point of, if you aren't playing them in certain lineups, think about how to leverage that fade rather than just fading him blindly and hoping that he busts. But as for the Brooklyn side of the value, now this is a new scenario where we have a team where we're going to see Millsap, Aldridge, and Griffin, who've obviously never really worked together in a rotation, be involved here, as well as Patty Mills. So now I think we have a case where we can potentially just hope to fade the groupthink and hope that we're just wrong on guessing what the team's going to do here. Because in reality, how confident can we possibly be in these minutes projections? I have Griffin at 21, Aldridge at 21, Millsap at 17, all players who are about 0.9 or 1 fantasy point per minute. So they can all pay off their price tags in that time. And Patty Mills is at about 22 minutes for me right now. So like all these guys, it's really tough to know where their minutes are actually going to fall. But now we're seeing Millsap and Aldridge potentially really work their way up in terms of ownership. They did fall a little bit earlier. They were at about 30%, and I was totally on board with the fade there. But now at about 25%, what I'm doing is I'm just going to limit to playing one of Griffin, Aldridge, or Millsap. I just don't see a world where two of them have major ceiling games, and I definitely don't want all three of them, or even I don't even want two of them. So that's kind of how I'm approaching it.
Yeah, I think, and first of all, hearing you break it down like that, man, like gives me the chills. Like that nitty gritty is what we've been missing in the off season. So, man, I love it. Joe, put you on the spot real quick. Out of those three Brooklyn bigs, Aldridge, Millsap, Blake Griffin, how are you ordering those guys? Say if you have one lineup, you have to choose one. How would you rank them?
Mine would be Aldridge, Millsap, Griffin. I'm kind of avoiding the Millsap ownership. I still think, I know Aldridge had a pretty long stint away from basketball, but I think of those three, I think he still has the most left in the tank. And I think matchup wise, I think it caters more to him. I think Millsap Millsap and Griffin are both like bigger guys, but they're still extremely undersized when you're talking about Giannis at the rim. Not that Aldridge is much bigger, but he's bigger than both of them, where it might allow them to do a little more rim protection. And he brings more offensively to the table than both Griffin and Millsap, in my opinion. The one note I do want to make, to Kyle's point about if you're fading Noor, like you need to think about who benefits. I think one sneaky beneficiary, and the Discord is popping off about it, is Sandro. Mamu, I still can't pronounce his last name.
Mamu Kelashvili.
Mamu Kelashvili. That wasn't bad. Okay. I can't sit here and say I'm confident that he's going to crack the rotation tonight. To answer Javi's question, when I was looking at the Bucks rotation, I have him for about 11 minutes. That could be low, that could be high. Regardless, if I'm running one lineup, I'm not touching him. But it is worth noting, like he looked good in the preseason in the summer league. Like he is a very good facilitating big man. I just don't know. That just feels a little too cute for me. But if you're running 150, I don't think I would have 0%. I would definitely leverage off my Nora with some Sandro in addition to those other bucks that Kyle mentioned.
Yeah, man. I've been joking about how I've kind of become a Bucks homer since my Spurs have gone in the tank, and I was riding with you last postseason. But you took the words right out of my mouth talking about, most people call him Mamu, but now that I've almost got that down with Mamu Kalashvili, I'll say his full name as much as I possibly can.
I'll be calling him Mamu, no doubt about that.
Yeah,
man. But I'm right there with you, Joe. If I'm running even in 20 lineups, I think I would have at least one share of Sandro there, because we saw what he could do in the preseason in extended minutes, and especially on a 2-game slate, like crazy things can happen. Brook Lopez can get in foul trouble. What if Brook and Giannis get in foul trouble? With Bobby Portis out, there's not a ton of options.
And I think he's out too.
Absolutely. And I think Bud saw enough out of Mamu in the preseason to give him that extended run. If we do find, I'll knock on wood, no injuries, but foul trouble or something else crazy happens, I think he would 100% make my pool. Before we get out of this game, I'm just going to reference kind of those composite ranks that Eddie and I did, and maybe you guys can give me some super draft takes as well. My favorite guys from this game, obviously super draft. Again, if you haven't played, it's a multiplier. Or the kind of the main offering right now is a multiplier structure rather than your kind of typical salary cap structure. So it's a little bit of a different build there, because you can fit in whoever you want, right? Giannis to me is, if I'm running one lineup over there, I'm just going to take him even at his 1x multiplier and kind of lock in that high floor. And then outside of that, like Chris Middleton at 1.25, especially if you decided to fade Giannis, then I think you might even want to play Middleton and Drew Holiday. And over there, you've got Kevin Durant at 1x, James Harden slightly higher, 1.05x, which was enough for me, especially just kind of positionally there. You go 3 guards, 3 forwards, and a center. I would lean Harden over KD on Superdraft, but anything else on Superdraft for you guys up top?
I just think it's typically we're used to now NFL with Super Draft, and those slates are massive. We haven't had a 2-game slate in Super Draft since last season. I think it's important to remember, like, you do want to find that nice composite ranking, but it's like on a 2-game slate, it's really not worth sacrificing like a Giannis without a score multiplier or KD or something like that, just so you can increase your composite multiplier by using someone like an Andrew Wiggins or something like that, who might be like 1.35x. I don't know what his multiplier is, but I still think the raw ceiling of those guys is higher than just about anyone's with their multipliers.
Kyle, any differences for you?
No, I tend to agree. It's just like, for example, it's tough because you can fit anybody in on Superdraft, obviously with no salary cap. It's just a multiplier. So typically you're going to see those top guys levitate in terms of ownership. But the thing is, like, if everyone's rostering LeBron, AD, and Russell Westbrook, how likely is it that all 3 of those guys have monster ceiling games?
Yep.
Probably not all that likely, in my opinion. So you want to be able to leverage those kinds of scenarios, especially on a 2-game slate where if everyone's going to be playing, guys like LeBron and AD, they'll probably fade someone like Westbrook, right, who has the 1x multiplier, so no additional multiplier, but LeBron and AD happen to have that. AD, you can play him at the center spot, so it's a little bit unique there. But for like LeBron, I'm assuming, I don't have any ownership projections for Super Draft, but I'm assuming that we'll see LeBron have a much higher ownership projection than Russell Westbrook. So those kinds of things is how I like to think about Super Draft, because you're kind of playing tit for tat there when you're considering LeBron's ceiling versus Westbrook's ceiling, but the ownership won't really follow that kind of trend. So that's how I'm approaching it.
Sure. And we got a couple questions about Joe Harris specifically from this game. Someone I think we kind of all 3 kind of overlooked a little bit.
I tend to overlook Joe Harris quite a bit.
Joe Harris, shooting guard, small forward eligible. I know everybody's been saying this all day. I'm still not used to the multi-position eligibility on FanDuel. He's 4.3 there, all the way up at 5.8 on DraftKings, and a 1.6x multiplier on Superdraft for Joe Harris. So, Kyle, if you have any Joe Harris interests, where would you prioritize him?
So I do like him a little bit on FanDuel, but it's not really a play I feel overly great about because he is going to be very popular, but he is super cheap. So it kind of feels like you have a solid minutes floor that you don't really get. Like, it reminds me of, I believe it was 2 years ago when the Lakers were on this 2-game slate, and Danny Green was just a guy that everyone was playing because he was super cheap and was going to play a lot. That's kind of how I feel about Harris. I don't know if he has an immense ceiling. So if you wanted to fade him and go somewhere where you think might be, a little bit less of a optimal point per dollar player, but has a higher ceiling, I think that's kind of where I would look to go if I was trying to get off of Harris. But if you just need the salary, it's totally fine. I probably won't play much of him on DraftKings where he's 5,800. I would rather play Bruce Brown and then other options throughout the slate as well. But on FanDuel and then, pretty much just FanDuel's where I would consider him.
Sure. Joe, any difference for you?
No, and if I'm, like ownership is probably going to gravitate towards Otto Porter, who I still prefer in a vacuum. I understand that Joe Harris is cheap, but my issue with him on FanDuel is the fact that like his game caters to 3-point production. You get no bonus for that. You get no benefit for that on FanDuel, whereas like on DraftKings you do, which is nice, but it seems like DraftKings is almost overcompensated for that. So I won't have any on DraftKings just simply because of the price, even though the scoring benefits him. FanDuel, if I'm running multiple and I pivot off of Otto Porter and some, he would be the direct pivot for me.
Okay. Yeah. And I guess the last thing I wanted to touch on, Joe Harris, 1.6x on Superdraft. He's a 6 for me in the rankings. I would much prefer, Otto Porter Jr., 1.75x, maybe some extra minutes. We'll talk about the minutes restrictions and what we think those could be on two of those Warriors players in the next game here in a minute. But Bruce Brown, I would rather go to the 2x Bruce Brown on Superdraft over your 1.6 Joe Harris. So Not really differing from what you guys were saying, but just wanting to point out the difference in multipliers there. So anything else from this first game? Obviously, we'll jump back. Everybody in the Discord, we will get to your questions here shortly after we finish the second game. But Kyle, Joe, anything from Brooklyn and Milwaukee before we move on?
No, sorry. They just flashed the rings on Twitter. Holy cow, these are sick. Sorry, but no. I think we.
Do you need a minute?
No, I'm going to turn my fan on. But
Okay. All right. So the nightcap of the opening night doubleheader: Golden State Warriors at the Los Angeles Lakers. The new look Los Angeles Lakers, obviously with Russell Westbrook now in town. Kind of a similar. I guess I won't say build, but structure in terms of this game, salary-wise. A lot of studs up top. A lot of, we'll say, mediocre value at best down low. I guess with one guy standing out on all the sites. But we'll start up top again. Obviously, multi-time MVP, Steph Curry, LeBron James up top. Anthony Davis, Russell Westbrook kind of rounding out the studs here price-wise. Joe, I'll start with you, and we can go to the Lakers, I guess, because I think that's the biggest conversation piece up top on the slate, right? Is how is the usage going to break down? How are the minutes going to break down? How's Coach Frank Vogel going to stagger the minutes? And I think, like Kyle kind of said earlier, it's not a total guessing game right now, but we can't be, I don't think, super confident in our projections in terms of minutes.
Yeah, I definitely agree with what Kyle said in his sentiment earlier. It's hard because all three of these guys, specifically talking about the Lakers guys, are very inexpensive on DraftKings. The most expensive being LeBron at $9K, Anthony Davis 8.8, Russell Westbrook 8.6. Of those three, if I'm running one lineup, I'm still not playing any of them. I much prefer the studs in the other game. But if I'm running one and I want exposure here, I'd probably prioritize them: Anthony Davis, LeBron, and Russell Westbrook when you factor in ownership and just what I expect their role to be. You look at this Golden State team, and I don't necessarily think they have someone to stop Russell Westbrook, but they sure as hell don't have someone to slow down Anthony Davis. Yeah. And I understand that Westbrook is going to demand touches, but Stefano mentioned in the preseason that we saw Russell Westbrook serving more primarily as a scorer when LeBron was operating as the ball handler, the facilitator. If you start to take, and obviously with Anthony Davis and LeBron getting rebounds, if you start to take away peripherals from Russell Westbrook, he becomes a much more dangerous tournament play simply because of his inefficiencies. We've seen situations where he goes to a new team and he's the one that soaks up everyone else's usage and peripherals. My big concern is that this could be the opposite. He goes to a new team, he keeps his scoring up, but there are two players fully capable of soaking up his peripheral stats and arguably doing it more efficiently and more effectively. So Westbrook is a big wait and see for me right now, but I get the appeal of this price.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's the frustrating thing for me, like as a player looking at those prices, is I think most people would probably assume that Russell Westbrook's rates should and will come down playing alongside LeBron and Anthony Davis. How much that is, we don't know. And the price is what's kind of reeling us back in to Russell Westbrook. So, Kyle, with that, how are you breaking down those top three Lakers guys, and I guess get into Steph Curry and how important you think he is to your builds tonight?
Yeah, so it is tough. Like I think one thing that's important, like when you're using projections super heavily, is to understand like where they might be wrong or they might be at fault, and that's definitely in a spot where you have somebody who has relied on such heavy usage and such specific roles within previous offenses, and that could be completely different now. It also couldn't be different. Like things are just kind of uncertain right now. So it's important to understand how those might be wrong right now. So like, for example, it's tough to project like how Westbrook's rebounding rate might change. I would assume it's going to go down a little bit playing alongside Anthony Davis, LeBron, who's a good rebounder, and then whatever center is potentially on the floor at that time. Obviously, AD is going to get some run at center, but I'm sure Dwight Howard and DeAndre Jordan will combine for a significant amount of minutes. So like, it is interesting to see, to like, think about how that could change. But we've always known Russell Westbrook to be the stat sheet stuffer, right? Like that's what he's doing. So I wouldn't be surprised to see it really not change that much. And they'll stagger the lineups. Russell Westbrook will have plenty of times where he gets to kind of run the show, maybe play alongside AD more than LeBron. So there's plenty of things that we might not see yet and trends that we can't really account for. So I think the big thing for me is you're not really seeing a big ownership spotlight on this game. Like the thing that sticks out to me is Anthony Davis ownership is not high. I just read another update. He's under 20% now on DraftKings. For a guy that you can play at center that's under 9K, he's going to be my priority out of Los Angeles today. I think LeBron's great. I think Russell Westbrook's a good play at that price. But Anthony Davis is the guy that I'm most interested in because, like, I think the main intrigue to Westbrook is the price. But Anthony Davis is only $200 more. So, like, you can still – and now he's about half the ownership that Westbrook is right now. So, I do prefer AD over – those two there. We
got a lineup update.
Yeah.
Wow.
Oh, wow.
Nick Claxton starting at center.
Yeah, Steve Nash, who I guess apparently said that he wasn't going to give out his starting lineup in his pregame availability. Okay. The deadline hit where you have to submit your lineup to the league. So we got it now. 27
the first
minutes
slate of the year, man. Like, give us a break.
Yeah. So Nick Claxton. Getting the start at the 5 alongside James Harden at the 1, Joe Harris, Kevin Durant on the wings, and Blake Griffin kind of playing your trail 4 spot there to round out the 5. And I guess we'll just hit on as well on the other side, Drew Holiday, Grayson Allen, Chris Middleton, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Brook Lopez will get the start for the defending champions. So quickly, let's circle back and just kind of talk about Nick Claxton. Joe, we'll start with you because I know Kyle's probably going messing with a bunch of numbers here, and we'll see what that spits out. But kind of first take on seeing Claxton in the lineup, Joe.
Okay, torn. Like he's looking at Fanduel first, he's $4,600. That's expensive for Nick Claxton. Like, I like him. I like his permanent production, but he's also a very raw individual, and he's going to be meeting Giannis at the rim over and over. There's as many ways as we see to succeed here. There's as many ways, if not more, to fail. So I'm curious to see what the ownership trends will be now. But I still, if I'm looking at FanDuel, if you're looking for a dirt cheap center, I still prefer Kevon Looney for $700 cheaper. But man, like he opens up so much and helps open up more for rostering 3 studs on DraftKings, and it makes it really appealing for me here. It's again, the big hang up for me is one, how many minutes will he play? Like, is he going to get 2 rotations and just be done, and then they mix in, Lamarcus Aldridge and all them? Or is he going to be a legitimate part of this rotation because they think, like, he has the defensive prowess to not stop Giannis, but help limit him? And Nick Claxton is a very good rim protector. We've seen it before. I just can't trust Steve Nash, and now I think he's a good play. I think he's a very good play. I just don't know how confident I'll be with him in one lineup.
Yeah, I think I would kind of feel the same way, and it also makes me think that I kind of like Lamarcus Aldridge a little bit more now. I don't know if I really expected him to get the start, but the fact that he is going to be, I think, at worst, kind of like second banana in this second unit for the Nets. Just kind of strengthens my ranking of those three guys that we talked about, be it Aldridge, Millsap, and Griffin, who's obviously starting. Kyle, any data updates over there that are kind of making things pop for you?
Well, so the thing that is really tricky with kind of projecting these minutes for this team is because I didn't really think Claxton would have a major role, because I thought that we could potentially see at times Kevin Durant play the 4, and then maybe even Joe Harris at times play like a small 4. So like that is what's making this tricky, is because I don't see them just like eliminating someone like Aldridge or Millsap's minutes a ton. So those guys obviously do take. Well, Millsap specifically, I think, takes a pretty big hurt here. I think it could be tough for him to really find significant minutes, or at least have a real ceiling for significant minutes. So that's the tricky part in terms of breaking that down, because I've always thought we would see a good amount of, maybe tougher today against Milwaukee, where we would see Kevin Durant or Joe Harris serving as like the 4, like a smaller lineup, right? So that might have been a tougher scenario today anyway. Maybe that's why Claxton's getting the start. So right now I did bump up Claxton to basically where Aldridge's minutes were, and I dropped Aldridge about a minute or 2, and I have Millsap cut like 4 minutes right now. So I'll continue to iron these out. I'm still off by a few minutes, and I'll update again. But right now it's just a little bit of a confusing thing. But it is tough to see a world where like Claxton doesn't play at least 18 minutes probably. I mean, that's kind of where I feel about Claxton right now. Like I think 18 minutes is probably his median, or not his median, I guess like his floor. But I guess it could go really weird and it just doesn't work, and then they don't play him. But I think right now it'll be between 18 or 20.
I do think Herman in the Discord made a very good point. Like this, regardless of whether we think Claxton's going to play 18, 25, 14 minutes, this is very bad for at least one of the bigs. They're not going to play 4 bigs in a rotation. So I think I agree with you, Kyle, that Millsap takes the biggest hit here if you're looking at the individual matchup. But it certainly doesn't help anyone else in this rotation.
Would you guys prioritize Claxton over a guy like Lamarcus Aldridge now?
No, I think I would prefer him over Aldridge. Certainly over Millsap, yes.
I think in a spot where we see maybe ownership completely flip and Aldridge is the low-owned guy, I wouldn't mind that, because overall I do think Aldridge still has a ceiling. And maybe on a larger slate, I would still prefer Claxton, because Claxton's a good per-minute producer as well. Again, DraftKings last year, he was just under a point per minute, and Aldridge was right around there as well. So I think it depends on the ownership for me. But as of right now, I feel better about Claxton.
Well, after that kind of little bump in the road for us there, appreciate that, Steve.
Well, Zach, what would it do to your composite rankings here?
Oh, let's see. I mean, I'm right there with you, where I would probably knock down Paul Millsap on both sites. I think he would probably end up like a 4 for me on Superdraft, and probably a 5 or 6 on DK, 3,800. Again, this Paul Millsap is a guy, we've seen it for years, more in Denver, where he was getting the shorter stints rather than in Atlanta. But no matter what role Paul Millsap plays, he's always a pretty good fantasy point per minute producer. So not out of play, but I would really bump up. Let me see where I had Claxton at a 6 on DK. I want to put him at an 8, but I think you brought up, I saw Herm's point, guys like this, especially on a 2-gamer, could end up being massively owned. So I don't know if I'm running to push all my chips in on Claxton, especially with so many other kind of 4K and below shots that I would want to take if I was running multiple lineups. And that's something we can kind of get into with this game. We can start with this kind of the value du jour today, if you will, in Jordan Poole. He was the first player that we ranked today, and just went immediate 10 on DraftKings at 4.8. Anybody who's been playing preseason DFS or just paying attention to the Warriors preseason at all knows what kind of work Jordan Poole has been putting in, and the usage that he's getting in this offense, the trust that he has, not only from his teammates, but from Steve Kerr, putting him out there, letting him. I mean, he's kind of like Klay Thompson light at this point, not in terms of skill, but in terms of opportunity. I believe every time he stepped on the court in their 5 preseason games, he was either first or second in shot attempts for the Warriors. And somebody can check me on that if I'm wrong, but that was a quick spin through the box scores I took before we went on the air. So Jordan Poole at this high ownership, I think in my 20, if I was playing on a site like DraftKings, I think I would just lock him in. The opportunity is too high for me, and I'm going to lock him in thinking that he's going to be optimal and say that anybody who fades him is just going to end up behind me. But Joe, any differing opinion there on Jordan Poole?
No, actually, no. Like, I had a couple questions today earlier on Twitter in my DM saying like, hey, would you fade the Jordan Poole chalk? I think fading, like if you run, 1,000 sims of this slate, I think fading is going to be the minus EV move. If you want it different from the ownership, I'll go overweight. I think that's the most appealing way to do it, because even if you go overweight, he's going to be more than chalky enough where if he busts, it really won't hurt you and you won't bottom out. But if he goes off, that's where you're really going to benefit. If he's in all of your lineups, there is not a single one that's not benefiting from that. So I'm 100% on board with the 100% exposure.
Yeah, so we saw, I mentioned the high ownership. Right now, Kyle's got him at 59.5 projected ownership on DK, all the way up at 72% ownership on FanDuel. So, Kyle, if you're running, an NME build tonight, are you kind of with us where you're going to lock him in, or are you going to do something different with Jordan Poole?
So I'll probably try to have some kind of hedge there. I do think that if you are just saying, let's roll with Jordan Poole, going 100% does make sense. But I'm probably going to have about 80% of him. I think that's my game plan right now, and have that other 20% kind of have sprinkles of, if Poole were to fail, like who are some guys that could potentially pop in, maybe get some extra shots, extra minutes. That's kind of the way that I would approach it. But yeah, he is by far the best value play for me on the board. And, when Joe was mentioning if you're running sims to see if you would, be in an optimal lineup or crack that value, I do a target score for every player and how often they would hit that GPP target score, which is typically about 6x their value. And I have Jordan Poole with the same, right around the same target score as James Harden at about 50% of the time. So he's just so cheap to where his ceiling is so solid. He was able to hit that 6x number pretty frequently. So I'm totally behind it. Like Harden and Poole are really strong tournament plays, but the issue with Poole compared to Harden is, with Harden, we have other pivots in that same price range with similar ceilings. I don't know if I feel that same way about someone in the under 5K range on both sides. I just don't think anyone has the kind of ceiling that Poole does down here. Like, for example, my ceiling projection tonight, I have Poole with a higher ceiling than Wiggins, who is on the same team, and he's $1,400 cheaper.
So how about Jordan Poole on Superdraft? Not quite the value there, 1.45x over on Superdraft. I had him ranked at an 8. I think he's an interesting pivot if you're going to fade, like specifically Russell Westbrook at 1x. I don't think it's a scenario where if you play Jordan Poole, you have to fade Steph Curry. Because like I said, I think he's kind of Klay Thompson light. I think those two guys, along with Andrew Wiggins, but with Wiggins, and we'll kind of get into these minute restrictions here in a second, I think Jordan Poole is kind of like safe in a GPP over there on Superdraft, not a smash 9 or 10 for me, but a very solid 8 in my rankings. Any differing thoughts there about Jordan Poole on Superdraft before we move on?
Go ahead, Kyle. Go ahead.
The only difference that I feel is I agree with you on where you don't need to avoid him if you have Steph, but if you don't have Steph, my interest in Poole is through the roof. Like, I think if you're not playing Steph, you're either expecting that game to just be a blowout or just nobody to do anything, which is just impossible. So, and even if it is a blowout, Poole could potentially benefit from that. So if no Curry, I really like Jordan Poole.
Gotcha. Joe?
I like him. I think if you're running one super draft lineup, it makes sense. He's, what is he, 1.25 or 1.35x? But there is
Poole 1.45 for Poole.
Oh, 1.4. Okay.
Yeah.
I do think there are more routes for him to fail on Superdraft than on the other sites, though. Simply because he's not going to be as high owned. So I think if he bottoms out, you're in a little bit more trouble. But my only issue is you look at guys below him and their multipliers. I'm not like entirely sold on a fade in one lineup. And that's my issue. If you're running multiple, I would be okay with a Grayson. I'm not going to say Bruce Brown anymore because I think Bruce Brown might be another person that takes a bit of a hit if the Nets just run a bigger lineup now. I don't mind a Grayson Allen or like a Jordan Noir, like you guys said, for 2x. Like, I mean, if he comes in, plays 18 minutes, takes 10 shots, and hits 7 of them, like that's going to be a really nice fantasy day at 2x.
So sticking with the Warriors side here, we kind of mentioned, and I know there's been talk in the Discord all day about the supposed minutes restrictions. Light minutes restrictions, I think is what Steve Kerr said. But we saw these guys, specifically, I'm talking about Andrew Wiggins, Draymond Green, these light minutes restrictions. I personally think it's going to come in around 30. Both of those guys kind of low to mid 30s in terms of their normal workloads in a regular season game. And like I said, we saw them both play multiple games in the preseason and get into the mid 20s in minutes. So I'd be surprised if they didn't get up to that 30-minute mark. But Draymond Green, 6'8" on DraftKings. Andrew Wiggins sitting at guard forward eligible now, 6'2". So Joe, are those minute restrictions, the light restrictions, taking you off those two?
I was never on Wiggins in the first place. I'm rarely on Wiggins, especially against a pretty good defensive team with the Lakers, where I just don't think I don't think they're not going to put LeBron on Steph Curry. That'll be Russell Westbrook. So the thing is, we could very well see LeBron on Andrew Wiggins, which LeBron's not the defender he once was, but I mean, I don't really know what to tell you. Like, I don't like Andrew Wiggins against LeBron James. Herm's bringing up a good point here. Herm and Javier are having a conversation regarding Draymond Green in the Discord. He's the one that I do have more interest in, and it's kind of a bit of a squeaky wheel narrative with Draymond Green and just games he gets up for against really good opponents or games where they roll him out. I don't know how much I buy this loose minutes restriction. If there is a loose minutes restriction, he still gets 30 minutes. He has legitimate triple-double upside in those 30 minutes. If he has 28 minutes, that's still a play I'm okay with. If it comes out that he's getting 24, 25 minutes, at that point, I'm like, I'm probably going to eliminate you from my pool, maybe 1 or 2 lineups. But if I'm gun to my head, forced to choose one of them to kind of swallow the minutes limit with, it's Draymond over Wiggins. Yeah,
so I actually would kind of differ. I was kind of watching that back and forth that Javi and Herm were having.
Yeah.
I just don't like you can always get up for a game and have more energy, I guess, right? But for me, it's just the matchup. And this is not the matchup for Draymond Green. Like, obviously, Kevon Looney going to start at the 5 to start, but we know that Steve Kerr likes to run Draymond out there at the 5, and kind of that helps them do what they do on both sides of the court. But going up against, for 48 minutes, you're going to have either DeAndre Jordan, Dwight Howard, or Anthony Davis at the 5. None of those guys are good matchups for Draymond Green. I mean, this guy is the definition of undersized forward. And so it's just not something like, and if you go back historically, like last year, I think Draymond played all 4 matchups, and off the top of my head, Anthony Davis only played 2. But Draymond did not find fantasy success in this matchup last year, and I just don't think it gets too much better. Adding DeAndre Jordan, especially Dwight Howard, who is still a big, strong body who can score and defend. I won't say with the best of them, but certainly at an above average rate. So, Kyle, how are you kind of attacking those minutes restrictions for the Warriors?
So I don't think it'll be overly restricted. I still have them both at 30. I think I did consider bumping them down to like 28, but never really anything more significant than that. I think, again, like if you don't have Curry, it does make some sense to have more interest in Wiggins, who I'm with Joe. I don't really ever feel great about rostering Wiggins. It's just never fun. But if you don't have Curry, like the production has to go somewhere, right? And Poole is obviously going to be a prime candidate for that. But it wouldn't be surprising to see Wiggins, get a few extra shots if Curry, whatever isn't shooting well, or maybe, I don't know, for some reason Wiggins does pick up extra production on a bad Curry night. Maybe Wiggins is there at lower ownership. Again, not something I'm prioritizing, but I'll have sprinkles of him and Draymond there. The one guy I think does pick up a nice little minutes boost with those two. I had both Draymond and Wiggins at 32 minutes and dropped them both down to 30. And I gave like 3 of those 4 minutes to Otto Porter Jr. So I think Otto Porter Jr. is a nice value play, especially on Fanduel, where he's 4,400. Going to be fairly popular. I'm at about 47%. But on DraftKings, 5,300 isn't the worst price. And he kind of falls into that spot where maybe pay up a little bit for a guy who isn't an ideal point per dollar play to get a little contrarian. But 10% is where I have him right now on DraftKings. So my top 2 plays obviously are Curry and Poole, just like everybody else in the world. But after that, I like Otto Porter as a value play, and then in like tournament options, Green and Wiggins. I get the idea behind Looney, but he's actually getting a good amount of ownership tonight on FanDuel. 23% projected ownership right now on FanDuel, which is a pretty significant number there. So, I think Looney is fine, but probably not a guy I get to a ton.
Yeah, and you mentioned Otto Porter Jr. Also 1.75x on Superdraft. One of the few guys that I think, especially if I'm running, 3-5 or more lineups than that, I'm getting some shares of in multiple lineups. And I don't think you're crazy if you roster him in one over there on Superdraft. But Kyle, I kind of want to stick with you here because there's also some bench guys I think that if you're running multiple lineups have a lot of merit to mix into your build. Specifically kind of the backup bigs, which would be not necessarily big guys in the traditional sense, right? Nemanja Bjelica in Golden State now, and Juan Toscano-Anderson still there. I guess I should say still home. He's an Oakland boy, right? So any interest in those guys kind of as the backup, again, undersized forwards for Golden State?
Yeah, I think Bjelica's pretty interesting. Like if the minutes projections are wrong and maybe they don't go to Otto Porter, I could see them going to Bjelica. Like Bjelica, might be high praise, and obviously not the defender that Draymond is, but on the offensive side, like a bigger guy who can facilitate a little bit. I'm assuming that's kind of what they have in mind there. So maybe he gets the minutes over Otto Porter. And then another guy is Damien Lee. Like if Jordan Poole were to fail, I think we see Damien Lee maybe the guy that gets more minutes, gets more shots, and maybe picks up. I think Otto Porter is also in that realm. But if this game goes sideways, I could see Lee picking up some minutes. And I have him at 18 minutes. So it's not like he's the worst per minute guy. He's about 0.75 fantasy point per minute. So he happens to be second worst on this particular team, but it's not the end of the world in terms of a value play on a 2-game slate, and he's under 5% owned on DraftKings. So Damien Lee, Bjelica, and Toscano-Anderson. I do prefer Bjelica over Toscano-Anderson, but Lee and Bjelica are pretty interesting.
Joe, how are you prioritizing these bench warriors? So out of the bench warriors, I do like Bjelica quite a bit. Like Kyle said, if they're to add on to that, I think if they're in a position where they need offense, he would be one of the people they bring off the bench just because we've seen him shoot. He's a better shooter than Draymond is. There's no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. He can come into that. Otto Porter is still my favorite. I think he's going to be much more popular on FanDuel at 4.4 than he is on DraftKings at 5.3, but I absolutely love him on both. He also had a very strong preseason. We talked about on the podcast a little bit, but if he's healthy, he contributes across the box score. And I think that's important in a matchup like this. Outside of those guys, I get the Damien Lee if you are trying to leverage the ownership that Jordan Poole is garnering. I'm not a bench guy, but in terms of value, I like Kevon Looney on FanDuel simply if you're looking for salary relief at the center position, 3.9. Like I like him for 3.9 still more than I like Claxton for 4.6. I think as long as he avoids foul trouble, which is a big if in this matchup, there's a role for him just because of how big the front court of the Lakers are. Like they're rolling out Anthony Davis and DeAndre Jordan. That's a massive front court that they're not going to throw. Bjelica at the 4 and Draymond at the 5. So I think there is a path for like 26 to 28 minutes from Kevon Looney tonight. But I in terms of just raw value and bench assets, I have more interest in the Lakers side than the Warriors side in this game.
Yeah, so let's talk about that right now. Obviously, not an insignificant injury report here for the Lakers, even though their 3 studs are playing. Trevor Ariza out, Wayne Ellington out, Talen Horton-Tucker out. Malik Monk looks like he's going to suit up after sitting out the last couple preseason games, but Kendrick Nunn also questionable. So possibly opening up some value with Malik Monk. But I think kind of more importantly, Kent Bazemore, who's going to get the start at just 3.6K on DraftKings. So Joe, you mentioned you like some of this kind of Lakers, I guess you could say secondary, the secondary plays from LA.
Yeah.
Who are you prioritizing?
Kent Bazemore is probably number 1, and I don't like that he's probably going to be the most popular of them. But when he was on Golden State, we've seen situations like this where he's played really well. Like he does a lot. Like he scores, but he's a huge stock guy. He'll get rebounds. He'll distribute the ball. He can handle the ball a little bit. And if you look at the value on this slate from the Lakers, and then kind of put it side by side with who's going to miss this game for the Lakers, I think it benefits Bazemore's role the most, like a combo wing. Like Carmelo Anthony at 3.9 is fine. He'll come in and probably have a rather high usage rate off the bench. But, if he's split, if his minutes are going to be behind Anthony Davis more than anyone else, because for some reason Lakers just won't play Anthony Davis at 5. I have a hard time. Like if Anthony Davis has a ceiling game, Carmelo Anthony is probably going to be the biggest person to suffer because he's just not going to see the floor. So I prefer Bazemore. I like Malik Monk in tournaments, but I don't think Malik Monk is ever anything more than a tournament dart thrower just because you know how streaky and inefficient he can be and the fact that he doesn't really do anything besides score. If he gets hot, they'll keep him on the court, but that's a big if as well. If Kendrick Nunn plays, I can't say I love him, but if he's out, I think if you're in a situation where you're fading LeBron, I think it makes sense to play Rondo as a value in a tournament. I think I saw a lot of discourse on Twitter. I think people are getting a little confused. Like, it's not necessarily Rondo and Westbrook that negatively correlate. I think it's more Rondo and LeBron based on their role as the facilitator and distributor. In the preseason, we saw Rondo play alongside Westbrook quite a bit, with Westbrook playing off ball. If that's any indication, then I would like, if you're trying to hedge some LeBron lineups, I would like to probably throw Rondo in there if Kendrick Nunn is out.
Kyle, anything else to add about these secondary Lakers guys?
No, I agree with the Nunn call. Like, he's a guy that you kind of want on a slate like this where you're kind of just hoping that he gets hot, right? And I have him for about 23, 24 minutes, so I could see him going out there and scoring 15, 16 real points in that time and really just heating up. And on a 2-game slate, like, you kind of are looking for certain plays that you always have like variance working your side, and that's kind of leans me towards like streaky scorers. So Nunn makes a ton of sense, especially in lineups where you maybe don't have LeBron or Westbrook. So really like the Nunn call. But other than that, someone did ask me if I prefer Bazemore or Anthony. I guess a slight lean towards Bazemore because he's a little bit cheaper on both sides, and I have Bazemore for one more minute. But other than that, like, there's not a real big significance between both of them.
Gotcha. Well, we're coming down to it. Under 3 minutes until the first lock of the NBA regular season. And a lot of subs in the Discord rightfully helping out the other subs. 6% overlay currently in that main $15 contest on DraftKings. I don't believe that the Fanduel contest, has filled either. Just under 80% full there, I think. Maybe a little over 80 at this point. And Superdraft, tons of overlay over there. Looking like, probably about 1,000 entries, 1,500 entries till we get that rig free. So pretty much anywhere. I mean, if you're feeling good about it tonight, obviously I know it's a 2-game slate, and that's not always something you want to attack with a ton of volume if you're playing with some good bankroll management. But I mean, I'm always a fan of getting an overlay wherever we can, even on a showdown slate, but maybe I'm just a degenerate. I don't know. We'll take the last minute 45 and answer any questions. So fire away in chat. I know some of them have been building up. Joe, since you're about to go, enjoy your first Bucks game to begin the defending season, $4 too much for you? If 2 of them are value guys, so I guess 2 studs, 2 value guys.
So I'm gonna assume
all right for you?
I'm just gonna take a shot here, and I'm assuming because I if this is FanDuel, I'm gonna guarantee that it's Grayson Allen, Middleton, Giannis, and Nwora. I'm okay with that. Again, you have to if this were a 7-game slate or something like that, I would be very concerned with 4 players from the same team. But there's only 4 teams in action tonight, so I think that has to just go into your lineup construction. Yeah, I'm totally fine with it.
Kyle, Harden and Durant okay in the same lineup for you?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
And we've got somebody asking for Carmelo minutes projection. What do you got right now, Kyle?
24 and a half is where I have him.
There you go. FanDuel is 90K short entries, that is, of filling there. I believe it's a $3 tournament.
90K? Wow.
Yeah, they're at about 309 out of 396 right now. 310. So, yeah, we're 20 seconds away. So, any questions?
Shaq's off the rails on TNT right now. He said, I'm better than Wilt. I'll bust Wilt's ass. I don't disagree, but just leave that off the TV, man.
I did see I saw like a recolored, redone HD 4K
I saw that,
highlight of Wilt.
Yeah.
That guy looks different. Especially
He's unbelievable.
He was different compared to people he was playing against. That's very true. We do have a comment on YouTube: Durant or Giannis. If it's straight up, I lean Giannis, but I think getting both of them in a lineup is probably a priority for me, especially on DraftKings, more so than FanDuel.
Well, so Kyle, I'll ask you the same question since we've got biased Bucks man over here.
So I maxed out on the optimizer 4 for every team. Typically, I'll do 2 or 3. So I think 4 is fine tonight on a 4-game slate. But I think it does depend on the 4 that you are rostering. Like, I probably don't want Giannis, Drew, and Chris Middleton with whoever as my 4th. Like, I don't know if that's the route I want to take. But, like, if it's 3 value guys and Giannis, or maybe if it's no Giannis and both Drew and Chris and then 2 value guys, I think that's totally fine.
Right. I know we're locked, but would you prioritize Giannis over Durant, or would you go Durant in one lineup?
I would prioritize if it's a chalky lineup, I would. It is tough. If it's a chalky lineup where you're playing Poole and Nwora and whoever chalk that you really like, I would prefer Durant over Giannis, because if you're just building the chalk, you're kind of asking to dupe, and there's already less value in particular lineups on a 2-game slate. But if you feel good about being contrarian elsewhere, I do prefer Giannis straight up over Durant.
All right. Well, I'm going to try to pull up some DraftKings ownership here. And what do you say, Joe? We initiate Kyle into the Dream Stream with some ownership game.
Let's do it. I'm going to keep my mouth shut because I spoiled too many of them last year.
Okay. All right. Well, as long as my machine here will load it up, and looks like finally – here we go. So that DraftKings was $1.25 million, $250K to first. Only filled 80.2K out of 98. So we ended up with 3.7% overlay, something like that. So not bad. If you have a lot of lineups in that contest, we always like free equity. And I'm downloading the ownership
while
now.
You're downloading it, are we?
Yeah.
We're just talking DraftKings for the ownership game. So referencing FanDuel, I'm going to their clutch shot, the 75K to first, their big tournament. Jordan Nwora under 20% owned, which is kind of surprising. He's 4% less than Lamarcus Aldridge, and he's less than Brook Lopez. He's only 2% higher than Pat Connaughton. That's a surprising one. That is probably Joe Harris, almost 50% on FanDuel.
In the $100 single entry on FanDuel, and the worst 40%.
Okay, so that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah, but Durant is only 36%, while Giannis is about 76%. So I don't mind that.
I don't mind it at all. Yeah, I like that. Another one I like quite a bit. Do you have the DraftKings up, Zach?
It's still loading, man. Tell you what, man. This time next week, I'm gonna have a new computer here. We'll be running smooth. We won't have to wait 90 seconds for the freaking.
I mean, are we just going? We're going off the tip-off special, right?
I think I can click through lineups here, and
that's kind of what I'm doing too.
Yeah,
I can pull it up. I got it up right now.
Oh, Kyle, don't spoil it.
Oh, I'll let you guys.
Yeah, you're the one guessing.
Oh, okay. All right.
I'll run through some lineups and show your white cow. Okay.
Okay.
We're gonna start. So Zach, we did it a couple ways last year. We either gave a player or just who you think is highest and what around the percentage was.
Just give us the top owned player on this first game. See, Joe, it's not like it's not super fun with the guy who like knows all the data and has the ownership projections, right? Like, because he's gonna crush it. But all right, number one, Kyle.
My ownership projections could be wrong. I'm gonna go Giannis.
Giannis number one.
What do you think he's at?
Well, he has to guess his number, right?
I'm curious to see what the number I had is. Let's see, because I updated it. I had him at 50. No, sorry, I had him at 54. So I'll guess 55.
58. So right there, not far off. We'll go top 3 for you. So number 2.
Harden.
James Harden, number 2.
This is no fun.
I know.
So I actually had Harden projected as more popular in the ownership. So I'll say 52.
Yeah, 55. So right in that range. And then number 3, I'm hoping this will throw you for a loop. But yeah.
Is it Bruce Brown?
It is not. Bruce Brown, number 7.
Wow.
Damn, I would have loved if Bruce Brown was 3.
Is it Drew Holiday?
Drew Holiday, number 5.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Did Grayson Allen get up there, or is it Nora?
No, it's Joe's favorite player, Grayson Allen.
It's Grayson Allen.
Wow. Joe,
Yeah.
look at you moving needles.
Nora's low. Nora's low.
Really?
I shouldn't say low. Nora's I see Nora at 28%.
Yeah, Nora, number 8.
Grayson sitting at 51%.
So, kind of, I guess the last thing I would want to point out here before we get out of here, because Joe, I want to let you go watch the game. Lamarcus Aldridge held 17.5%. He's over Nick Claxton at 14. Nick Claxton, though, did not get above Aldridge, obviously, or Paul Millsap, who held 15%. Wow. So all those guys kind of in the same range there. Blake Griffin at 10.5. Any kind of takes on that, or is it where you thought it was going to be, Kyle?
I would be glad to have a lot less Millsap than that. Mm-hmm. Just because in comparison to Aldridge and Claxton, you said Millsap's the most popular of those 3?
So we go Aldridge 17, Millsap 15, Claxton 14.
Oh, okay. So they all kind of just eat at each other. So it's not like either of them are bad.
Yeah.
Okay. Crazy. So yeah, I think that's all pretty sane. I think if you have like 20% Claxton, you're feeling better about it than if Claxton would have gotten to like a ton of steam and been like 30 or 40%. So yeah,
I would have thought Claxton got above 20%, but the field did not run to Claxton as we saw. I mean, kind of a theme in the preseason. Kyle, I don't think you're really about that preseason life. You know, I know you did the projections, but I don't know if you're diving into the Mamu Kalashvilis and all that kind of stuff. But kind of one thing we saw in the preseason was the first game was getting a ton of ownership.
Yeah.
And so it didn't really carry over to this game, you know, with that early news with Claxton kind of throwing a wrench into what we thought was going to be the starting 5. So just kind of another data point we can take and move on to tomorrow. So that's going to do it for us, wrapping up the first dream stream of this NBA season here at FTN Daily. I want to thank Kyle Murray, Joe Metz, and Thomas, our fearless producer behind the glass, making it happen for all the people here at FTN. We'll be in the chat, in and out kind of in this first game, obviously watching along with you all the subs in Discord, and then we'll certainly show up before that second game locks if anybody's making any swaps or playing some showdown contests. We're always here throughout the night, throughout the slate. The dogs are excited. I'm excited. We'll go ahead and get out of here. We'll see you guys tomorrow. Fast Eddie Fear making his triumphant return tomorrow on FTN Daily. Good night.